The Capo Chronicle isn't your average Substack newsletter. For one, the headlines are incredibly boring. Secondly, there's really no free version of it, since every issue that's sent out includes a paywall. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about it is that it's managed to convert upwards of 40% of its email list into paid subscribers, which is a conversion rate at least 10 times higher than the average Substack newsletter. What's more, its owner Dan Koller achieved all this while maintaining his full-time job. In a recent interview, Dan explained how he launched the newsletter, why it took off in his Dallas suburb, and whether he thinks other wannabe local news entrepreneurs could copy his model. Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. If you want to listen to an audio version of this interview, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're a longtime fan of this show, you're probably aware that it's not monetized with ads. I'm entirely reliant on paid subscriptions to my Substack newsletter to fund this content. Subscribers get access to a deep archive of interviews with the world's most successful media entrepreneurs. They also get to book a half-hour introductory Zoom call with me. Go to simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com. Or just Google the words Simon Owens and newsletter. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey Dan, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I'm super excited to have you on because as far as I can tell, you have the best paid conversion rate on Substack. So you have only like 3,000 free subscribers on your newsletter, but you have over 1,000 paid subscribers, which means that your conversion rate is above 33%, which I and pretty much everybody else listening or watching would just kill for. So let's talk about that. So you run like basically a local newsletter based, I think, in a suburb of Dallas. Your background originally is in journalism, right? Like I saw that you were like an editor at the Dallas Morning News. When did you get your start in journalism?
So I graduated from college in 1996. I'm from Dallas, but I went to school out of state. I moved back to Dallas after graduation with no real plan. And that was good because I wouldn't have been able to do anything immediately after graduation because about a week and a half after I walked across that stage, I was diagnosed with a tumor in my chest cavity, which explained why I felt like crap my entire last semester of college. But I was ignoring all of these symptoms because I was 21 and thought I was invulnerable. So I did chemotherapy that whole summer, and it went as well as that could go. And when it was wrapping up, my doctors said, okay, you're going to live. You could think about what you want to do with your life. And at that time, this was before monster.com or Craigslist, the classified ads in the Sunday edition of the Dallas Morning News would be this thick, like thicker than the entire newspaper is today. And
I think people just don't really appreciate, people who are under the age of like 25, like how lucrative classified ads were for newspapers.
So at that time, coincidentally, there were a bunch of little newspapers around Texas that were looking for entry-level reporters. And I thought, I kind of messed around at my college newspaper. I could probably try that. So I got myself a job at a small town called Sulphur Springs, which is halfway between Dallas and Texarkana. Everybody who grows up in Sulphur Springs moves to Dallas when they turn 21, and I did the opposite of that. And that was my first newspaper job. And, I was working my way up the ladder, to a slightly bigger newspaper and a slightly bigger newspaper. And within 4 years of getting that job in Sulphur Springs, I had gotten hired as an editor at the Dallas Morning News.
Yeah. And you were there for like 8 years?
I was there for 8 years. I had 3 different jobs. Most of those jobs were the kind where I was one of the worker bees that would make the newspaper come out at night, like show up at the office at 3 in the afternoon and get off around midnight or 1 a.m. Once my wife got pregnant with our second son, I tried to get a job on the day side, went to my bosses to talk about that. And when we were having that conversation, we were in the 4th round of buyouts followed by layoffs of my 8-year tenure at the Dallas Morning News. So I went and found my own dayside gig managing a chain of weekly newspapers that were affiliated with D Magazine, which is Dallas's glossy monthly magazine. I held that job for about 5.5 years. And then, like a lot of journalists, started taking jobs on the PR side to make a little bit more money, but I missed being a journalist. And so I started the Coppell Chronicle in 2021, A, because I missed it, and B, because when I moved to Coppell, this town had two weekly newspapers, and the one that I thought was the stronger of the two went under in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And so I saw a void to fill.
Yeah. And like you just have that skill set that I feel like a lot of journalists that are entering the industry now just don't have of starting at a local newspaper. That's what, I started with, right out of college. And it's just such like a valuable learning experience, like going to, board of supervisors meetings, city council meetings, school board meetings and stuff like that. And just kind of like learning this like local beat, this local community. In my experience, in my two jobs that I did local news, it takes about a year to even really truly learn the beat and, have that rapport and stuff like that, to where it doesn't feel like a struggle, like such a huge learning curve, every single article you're making. And so obviously you had this skill set. And when did you move to Coppell? And Coppell's like a suburb of Dallas, right?
Right. It's the northwest corner of Dallas County. My family moved here in December of 12. So we've been here almost 13 years. We moved here. My wife and I grew up in urban neighborhoods in Dallas, and we are products of the Dallas public school system. But the older of our two sons is mentally disabled. He's got an intellectual disability and he's on the autism spectrum. And we weren't quite ready to trust the Dallas public school system with him. So we moved to Coppell specifically to get him into this school district because they have such outstanding special ed programs.
And how big is this? Is it a county? Is it a city? Or like, what is it?
It's a city.
Yeah.
It's a city of about 43,000 people. Yeah. So 43,000 is what's posted on the signs of the city limits, the current population estimate.
So 43,000 people. Does it have like a robust like business? Like is it mainly just like people living there, or is there an actual like downtown or?
So no, there's like I wouldn't call it a downtown, but it has a reputation as a bedroom community. But I recently learned at a city council meeting, and this was surprising to hear, that because we are right by DFW Airport, like the planes that land at DFW Airport fly directly over my house. We have a huge warehouse district on the west side of town because it's like a logistical hub. Product lands at the airport and then it gets sorted at these warehouses and then it goes out on the trucks. And so it was very surprising to me to learn at a recent Coppell City Council meeting that more people commute into work in Coppell than people live in Coppell and go commute elsewhere, because it's always been portrayed as simply a bedroom community.
So there are two weekly newspapers. It sounds like one shut down during the pandemic. You left journalism and you have a full-time job working in like marketing, PR, and stuff like that. So that's, that accounts for 40 hours of your week, or however many hours, whatever your kind of typical workday is. So was it during the pandemic you suddenly had a little bit of extra free time at home, or what was the kind of dynamic that led to you launching the Coppell Chronicle?
So the impetus, there was two. One was that long established newspaper going under. It was called the Citizens Advocate. And then the second one was I read a Bloomberg profile of Judd Legume, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his last name, but he runs a Substack newsletter called Popular Information that has a national focus. And I laughed out loud when I got to a point in the article where it said that his niche is finding something that's so boring that nobody else is going to want to write about it. Because that reminded me of when I was running this little chain of community newspapers that were affiliated with D Magazine. I would tell the reporters I hired that our ideal stories are the ones that are really important to the people in this community, but will be utterly meaningless to people who live elsewhere. And so that to me, what Legume said sort of resonated with me, and that's what got me thinking. Well, if he's got this newsletter on this platform called Substack that is got a national focus, and he's writing about national stories, I wonder if I could duplicate that on a local level and fill the void left by the shuttering of that newspaper.
Yeah, and you picked Substack just because that's what Judd was using?
Yes, I don't know if I'd ever even heard of Substack until I read that profile of him on Bloomberg.
And so what was kind of like what was kind of the idea behind it early on, like in terms of like what kind of content you'd be publishing and what the cadence would be and stuff like that?
So I knew that I was going to do it on a weekly basis and that I would put it out on Sundays just because that's traditionally, what people associate with journalism. That the Sunday paper is where all the meat is, that the best stories are. I don't think I thought this from the beginning, but it took me not long, like within a few weeks, to fall into the rhythm of I'm going to have 4 headlines in every edition. And then I have, just like news briefs that I call the Chronicle Crumbs, that it's like, it's stuff worth noting, but it's not worth a whole story. And then I have a calendar of events at the end. And, 90% of what I write is stuff that I'm learning because I am one of the few people that's watching in its entirety every meeting of our city council, every meeting of our school board, every meeting of our planning and zoning commission. And sometimes I'll get 4 headlines out of a single city council meeting. If they take 4 votes on 4 different topics, to me that's 4 different headlines. You don't try to write one story about an entire council meeting.
Yeah, I did that. I remember my first time covering a sport or school board meeting, and my first newspaper job, and I turned in an article that just summarized everything that happened in the meeting, and my editor was like, no, 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 this is like 5 different stories that you should be
Right.
pursuing. That's like one of the first things you learn as a local newspaper journalist. So you treat the newsletter, unlike a lot of other like writers on Substack, like almost like a self-contained newspaper. So like you don't publish articles as you finish them, you wait and package them all in the Sunday newsletter that goes out. And I noticed like your newsletter, it just like the headlines are just like Capo Chronicle issue 52 and then the date. Like it's not like you're trying to like pull people in through, like a clickbait headline or anything like that.
No, yeah, the major headline is always Capel Chronicle volume number, issue number, and then I have the headlines on the 4 articles are up in the subhead, and then I also every time before I post, I go into the Substack settings and change for the SEO options. I change the lead headline for SEO purposes from that Capel Chronicle volume number to whatever the most enticing headline is. There have been a
Why not do that for the newsletter that goes out? Because if it's enticing on Google, why wouldn't it be more enticing on in somebody's email inbox or whatever?
I guess I don't feel like I have to because I have multiple people telling me that they eagerly await the arrival of the email every Sunday. Um, there's a guy who is a member of our city council, and he and his wife they each have their own subscription, which I appreciate the support. They could be sharing one, and she told me that on Sunday when she gets the alert on her phone that I've published, she hollers to her husband across the house, "Kohler's out."
That's great. Uh,
Which, you are right that the overwhelming majority of the time I just sit on my stories until Sunday. But there have been times that I've published what I call bonus editions when there's something breaking, like a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, we had a murder suicide. That type of news in this town is so rare. So I wrote and published something on the day that it happened. And then just about a year ago, our school board voted to close an elementary school permanently because of dwindling enrollment and budget deficits. So on the night that they decided officially which school was going to close and when, I published that story within an hour of the vote. And then just had a slightly more polished version of it in the following Sunday's edition.
Yeah, I remember, I was at this newspaper in 2007, and there was some like crucial vote that was going to happen after the deadline of the print deadline, and the editor's like, I don't know what we're gonna do. We have to have it to the printers at this time. And I was like, why don't you just put in the newspaper that you'll like, you could put some kind of preview, but say go to the website to look at like the actual article. Like it didn't even occur to them that they could just publish to the web, and like that's where they could direct people, which is just funny. That as late as 2007, that was still a revelation. You say that you watch these meetings. Am I guessing correctly that one of the upsides of the pandemic is that created the norm of them like broadcasting a lot of these government meetings over Zoom? Because I've interviewed at least one other local news person who had a lot of success from just watching these like Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I think that they were already doing that. They don't. They're not broadcasting them via Zoom. They've got their own in-house stuff. Both our city and our school district. The three big ones, like the city council, the school board, and the planning and zoning commission, their meetings are streamed live and then recorded and archived, and the archives are set up in a way where you could just jump to a particular topic on the agenda and not have to fast forward to find it. And then some other city, I don't know what to call them, panels, bodies, commissions that I pay attention to, like our library board, our parks and recreation board. Their meetings are recorded on audio only, and then the city uploads those to SoundCloud. And so I listen to those after the fact. Sometimes I go to those in person because I'm missing out on the visuals. But it's very rare that I have to attend these meetings to cover them. I go, if they're going to have a particularly contentious vote and I want to get reaction from people in the audience in the moment, then I will go and attend in person so that I can accomplish that. But most of them I'm just watching when it fits, because I'm publishing on a weekly basis. I watch at my convenience.
Yeah, God, I wish that had existed when I was a newspaper reporter. Because like, you would have to wait, you would have to work a full day at at your job. Then you couldn't go home because home was 40 minutes away. Like you had to stay at the office and then drive to the meeting and then drive home. Sometimes pretty late at night if there was like a late vote or something. It would have been so much easier to just go home and watch that and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, obviously as a local reporter, like the meeting is kind of like a jumping off point for stories. Are you just writing what's happening in the meeting, or are you doing follow-up interviews and stuff like that?
Sometimes I am, but most of the time I'm just telling people, like, the tagline at the end of every edition is that I watch every meeting of our city council, our school board, and our planning and zoning commission because you don't have time for all that. Like I know that if all I'm doing is telling people what happened in these meetings, then I'm breaking a lot of news to them because they're not going to know about it otherwise. But I do get occasional assignments from people in the community, or I get sometimes it's a tip like, hey, you might want to look into this. Other times it's people just tagging me on Facebook and saying, I need Dan Koller to go look into this. It's
And they're serious. They're being serious, not joking.
Yeah, they're being serious. A lot of times I'm also this gets back to something we were talking about earlier about the news that really matters to this community, but will be meaningless to people elsewhere. So we don't have a Chick-fil-A in this town, but there are ones in the cities around us, and they're coincidentally not far from the city limits. And so I have discovered that there is a state agency in Texas that if you're going to do any sort of construction work, you have to file a form that's publicly accessible. And so I check that daily you could filter these results for these forms by cities. So I'm checking obviously Capel, but then all of our bordering cities. And so last December, by doing that, I found out that the Chick-fil-A right across the city lines was going to be knocked down and rebuilt from the ground up. And that's a major, in my world, that's a major story. That was a lead headline one week, is that our closest Chick-fil-A was going to be out of commission for 6 months.
Yeah. And do you get like a lot of like crowds, like benefits of crowdsourcing where people are sending in news tips and stuff like that?
Yes, all the time. I've gotten three useful ones in the past 24 hours that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. And is that from people just hitting reply, or do you have like a tip line or?
Sometimes they're hitting reply. I've added to my tagline, the easiest way to reach me is to reply to any emailed edition, because it cracked me up how often people that I'm not Facebook friends with were trying to send me messages on Facebook, or trying to send me messages through Instagram, or trying to establish a connection on LinkedIn. When it's an email based publication. Why don't you just email me?
Yeah. Although I've noticed recently that like Gmail will send, if people hit reply on my Substack, Gmail will send it sometimes to spam, like at least
I've
50% of the
learned
time.
that the hard way as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which makes sense because it's forwarding from an address on Substack to your Gmail address, which might seem weird to Gmail. But yeah, now I check the spam filters at least once a week. So did you go paid right away?
I only like 4 weeks in. I obviously I didn't have an email list to start with, so I was just telling people about it via Facebook and Nextdoor. And I said that I was going to do the first four for completely free, and then I was going to institute the paywall. And at the time, the remaining weekly newspaper in Capel was charging $25 for a year subscription. So I thought I will try to undercut them by $1 and charge 24. And after I said that it was going to cost $24, then I found out that at the time the minimum that Substack would allow you to charge was 30. So I had to go back on my word and charge 30. And so the people that pay for it, they hear from me every Sunday. The people that are free subscribers hear from me once a month. And I tell them about, hey, if you haven't heard from me in a month, you missed this article and that article, and you're going to miss this thing that I'm working on for next week. And that usually prompts people to pony up and become, every time I do that, probably 10 to 12 people decide to become paid subscribers. And I kept the price at 30 until I hit my fourth anniversary, and I raised it to 40. But I said in one of those free editions that if you sign up, if you're already signed up, you're going to be charged $30 in perpetuity. And if you sign up by the end of this week, you're going to be charged $30 in perpetuity. And that got me like triple the number of new paid subscribers that I would normally get.
And so you keep almost 100% of the stuff that you publish like behind a paywall, and that's probably partly explains why your conversion rate is so high, is because there's not really that many benefits to being a free subscriber. So they figure out pretty quickly that they need to be paid. But like Substack has like tools where you can put part of the newsletter in front of the paywall and part of it behind the paywall, so that like at least the free subscribers can get some benefit by having some kind of content behind above the paywall. I think when we spoke last, like you weren't even doing that at all. Like there was no way other than your monthly email of alerting, the subscribers what they were missing. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I haven't experimented with that. I've been, just knocking around in my head whether I want to move to that thing where everybody would hear from me every Sunday, but the free subscribers would only get to read the first article, and then the paywall would pop up. I've thought about doing that. I really have nothing to lose by trying that, experimenting with that model. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it yet.
And so you also had this other cool tactic, is like, as you mentioned, you have a disabled son. And from what I understand, you position the messaging on how like the paid subscriptions are going to helping you in terms of caring for him and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my pie in the sky aspiration for him is that he might get a part-time job that pays minimum wage, but that might not even be possible. So he will really never make any money of his own. So every once in a while, when I'm trying to get people to become paid subscribers, I try to tug at their heartstrings because, whether I keep working at the day job I have now or I go work somewhere else, I think I'm always going to have that day job. And that's what my wife and I will live off of. But what I would like to happen is that the money I make off the Chronicle funds my son's adult life, because we aspire for him to, um, he can't live with us forever, because someday we will, God willing, we will go before he will. And if all he's ever known is living with mom and dad, then what happens the day after we're gone, right? So there are facilities that he could live in someday and thrive and be cared for, but those don't come cheap. But if I build the Chronicle up into what I think it can be, I will be making enough money for him to live in one of those facilities without relying on any money I have from my day job.
So you're just taking all the money from that and just like putting it in like an index fund or something like that.
Yeah. We have a what's called a special needs trust to take care of him. Uh, my goal when I started this, I said my goal was to get to 3,000 paid subscribers, which would make me somewhere between somewhere in the ballpark of 90 grand a year in revenue. And I thought that was a very realistic goal, because the last time a Capel City Council election went to a runoff, 3,000 voters turned out. And I figure if you care enough to vote in a city council runoff election, you care about the topics I'm writing about. You're just not a paid subscriber because either A, you don't know about me, or you're too cheap to pony up the now $40 annual fee. And to get to that number of 3,000, I don't even need all 3,000 people that voted in that election, because there's a huge chunk of by definition, everybody that voted in that election lives in the city of Coppell. There is a huge chunk of the Coppell School District that is in another city. And the people that live there should be just as interested in what I'm writing about. So I feel like 3,000 is a very realistic number to get to, but at the moment I'm approaching 1,300 paid subscribers. I have 3,300 total subscribers if you count the free people and the paid people combined.
Yeah. So you're on the way, but you still got a good ways to go.
Yeah. And so I promote it by I sponsor about half the sports teams at Coppell High School. I sponsor the PTA at Coppell High School so that my logo and link is in their newsletter. I sponsor the Youth Baseball Association in town, so there are Coppell Chronicle signs in the outfield of all the little ballparks.
That's what I love about local news, is you could do these weird things that you could never do with like a national publication. Like
Yeah,
there's nobody I could sponsor in that way, where they're just like seeing like my newsletter, like, when they're just walking around in their neighborhood and stuff like that.
my favorite sponsorship deal. It's the best $50 I've ever spent. One of our middle schools. This has got to be like 3 or 4 years ago. They auctioned off the naming rights to their gym, and so I won it. I was the only bidder, and so for $50, there was a plaque put outside the gym that identifies it as the Coppell Chronicle Coliseum. And the great thing is that the leadership of that PTA changes from year to year, and so the subsequent leaders have never had another fundraising auction. So I paid for it once, and that sign has been hanging there ever since.
So what is your kind of like, you have the day job, you're also like you're attending all these meetings. I mean, most of them I think are once a month, if I'm guessing. Um and then you're writing the newsletter. How do you kind of structure your week so that you could do this while, you know, it not eating up all your free time?
I don't watch as much TV or listen to as many podcasts as your average American adult these days. When other people are doing that, I'm watching or listening to these meetings, and sometimes I'm watching, or I'm not watching. I'm listening to them while I drive on my commute. I've just got to the the mayor of Capel, he complimented me on the accuracy of the direct quotes in my articles. And he wanted to know how many times I have to go back and listen to the meetings to get that exactly right. So I kind of talked to him about how the sausage is made. I said, most of the time when I'm listening to one of y'all's meetings, I'm doing the dishes at the same time, or I'm folding laundry, and I'm listening. And when I hear something particularly juicy that I know will make a great direct quote, I go and look at the computer and write down the timestamp so that I know, okay, you're going to, at whatever, 25 minutes and 30 seconds into the meeting, go back and listen to this, and you're going to want to write that, get that quote exactly right.
Yeah. You don't do automated transcripts?
I've tried it, and I didn't like the results, and I don't need the whole transcript.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't. Well, I mean, it's just I think automated transcripts are good for pulling out a single quote. They're not good for like if you're publishing like the full transcript as like as a published piece, because it takes a lot of
Yeah.
cleaning up. But like I've always found, I when I started out in journalism, doing like typing up transcripts by hand, which was just mind-numbingly boring. It's a godsend now that I can just like have it automatically transferred, and then if the quote's like a little iffy, I can go to the timestamp and listen to it to make sure I get it 100% right. But it saves so much time.
And, I only want to quote them when they're saying something really colorful or outrageous or funny. Most of, I try to keep it so that somebody could read the entire edition in less than 15 minutes. So I'm summarizing what happens. But recently, a member of our city council gave me a compliment that I hadn't heard before, but I appreciated. He said that uh, he thinks that I always have an accurate take on how something went down. Like my 2-minute summary of an hour-long debate, he said, always captures the essence of what the important parts were and what the predominant themes were. And he was just wanting to give me some kudos for that. So I appreciated hearing that.
So how has your relationship with the community changed, since launching this newsletter compared to before? Like, are you kind of like a local fixture who's kind of recognized around town as like, that guy, or what's it like?
Yes, my wife and my younger son, who just turned 17, have a running joke about when we go out to dinner or we go to some community event, how many people are going to recognize Dad, or how many people are going to come up and want to shake my hand or bend my ear about a certain thing that I should be writing about.
So when you look forward a few years, like obviously you have this 3,000 subscriber um, goal. What do you think you're going to be doing differently? Like, are you wedded to the subscription model? Would you take sponsorship money if it helped you get there more quickly? Like, how do you think about all that stuff?
A couple of coincidentally, just about a year ago, I was looking at the edition that was published a year ago this week, because what I do after I publish, I go into the version posted on my Substack website, and I go in and I put the paywall there. I put the paywall in like 2 paragraphs into the second article, so that if somebody shares, I always say that the lead article is public, and I put in the button that says share this please. And so if somebody shares it on their social media, the person they share it with will get to read the lead article, but then they'll run into the paywall. But then after a year, I go and I take the paywall out, and I figure if it's been out for a year, there's nothing, there's really no value into keeping it behind the paywall. So anyway, I was doing that for an article or an edition published a year ago. And in that edition, I said that I was thinking about instituting advertising in the Chronicle. Like, these would just be static images that would appear between the articles and would link to the advertiser's website, but there would be no pop-ups, there would be no video, nothing moving, nothing flashing. And I said, what do you think about this idea? And the overwhelming response was negative. And people said, I will pay you more if you will not include ads in this thing. So I got the message loud and clear and have not really considered it since.
How often do your subscribers comment on Substack, like in the comment section?
Every week. And there's a couple of people there. I'm coming up on the fifth anniversary of this thing, and I'm fairly certain I'm going to have a fifth anniversary party. And there are two women that I want to see there because I've never met them in person, and they both comment almost every week. And if they're listening to this, their names are Darla Mann and Donna Beckovac.
Interesting. And like, how many comments do you get per issue usually?
Usually a dozen. That's about the average.
Yeah. It's funny, like these people probably don't even know what Substack is, and yet they're kind of like integrated into its system and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So how much, this is something I always ask when I have successful local media news entrepreneurs on, is like, how much do you think that your model could be replicated across the US? Because obviously there are all these news deserts. There are lots of like kind of small to mid-sized counties that have, maybe there's a weekly newspaper like hanging on, but they're not innovating at all. Do you think there's like a huge market opportunity for more newsletters like yours?
Yes, I absolutely do. I know people that have duplicated it right here in the Dallas area. A woman that used to work for me at that chain of weekly newspapers, she saw what I was doing and duplicated it in another Dallas suburb called Allen. And then a woman that I had never met but had somehow heard of the Chronicle. She lives two towns over in another suburb called Farmers Branch, and she was picking my brain before she launched her own local newsletter. I urged her to just completely duplicate what I'm doing and to use Substack. I was lauding Substack for how easy they make it for creators, and she didn't take my advice. She decided to hire someone to build a website from scratch, and then the next time we got together, she was complaining about how what a headache that was and how much work she had put on herself. And I was like, "Don't you remember somebody telling you to just use Substack?"
Well, that's awesome. Well, Dan, those are all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
If you can't remember coppellchronicle.substack.com, I have reserved coppellchronicle.com via GoDaddy. It's just a single page that just points you to my most recent editions on Substack. And if you're looking for me on social media, I think I've got it down where on every platform I am at by Dan Koller, BYDANKOLLER. The Chronicle doesn't have its own social media accounts that are separate from mine because I think the last thing that this world needs is one more page on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.